I'd like to welcome you to our devotional study today. We are in Daniel chapter 4, and this chapter is the testimony of King Nebuchadnezzar, and it also reveals to us a dream that initially troubled Nebuchadnezzar. And we have not really even got into this dream as of yet. We're going to do that today. But what we have done is we have seen that the Word of God gives us the response of Nebuchadnezzar to the dream, that it troubles him, that he calls the people around him that could not give him any answers. And then last of all, he calls the man of God for an answer. And as we've been looking at that, we've seen several things that we can apply to our own life. Now we want to take some time today to look at this dream in detail that King Nebuchadnezzar sees, and we will look at the overview of it as well and hopefully get through as much of it today as we can. But it says in Daniel chapter 4, let's read this dream. In verse 10, it says, "Thus were the visions of mine hid in my bed. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great. The tree grew and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. The leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much. And in it was meat for all. The beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof, and all flesh was fed of it. I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher and an holy one came down from heaven. He cried aloud and said thus, Hew down the tree, cut off the branches, shake off his leaves, and scatter his fruit. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls from his branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdoms of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now therefore, O Belteshazzar, declare the interpretation thereof, for as much as all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known unto me the interpretation, but thou art able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in thee." So he gives him here the dream in detail. There is a great tree in verses 10 through 12. Note its location is in the midst of the earth. Its height is described as great. As far as development is concerned, the Bible tells us that it grew strong and very high. And when we think about the usefulness of that tree, it was a tree that was beneficial for all by the way of food and shelter. And then there's a great watcher in verse 13. It says, I saw in the visions of mine head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher and an holy one came down from heaven. As we see this, we believe that it is very obvious that this is an angelic being that was sent from heaven in this passage for a specific purpose. In Psalm 103 and in verse 20, it says, Bless the Lord, ye his angels, that excel in strength, that do his commandments, hearkening unto the voice of his word. And friends, the one thing that we can learn from them is that that's where we need to be also, that we need to do his bidding. We need to hearken unto the voice of his word. Then in verses 14 and 15, we see here that there is a great description. First of all, notice the falling of the tree. It says, he cried aloud and said thus, Hew down the tree, and cut off his branches, and shake off his leaves, and scatter his fruit. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls from his branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field. Let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. The tree fell. This shows that Nebuchadnezzar would lose control of his kingdom. He would be stripped, as it says here, of his duties of being a king. But then, notice he says, nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, in verse 15, even with a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. You say, what in the world is that all about? Well, that verse suggests the hope of restoration. Placing a band around a stump will preserve it from total decay. And Nebuchadnezzar, if I can put it this way, as a protected stump, would have an opportunity for restoration. This also suggests the severity and the completeness of God's judgment, the band preventing any sprouting of new growth until the time appointed. And then there's a great decree here. Let his portion be with the beasts and the grass of the earth. And then it says in verse 16, and let his heart be changed from man's, and let a man's heart be given unto him. Let it pass, let 7 times pass over him. Note the change of the pronouns. In verse 12, this tree, pointing to Nebuchadnezzar, the pronouns that are used are the pronoun it. Now in verse 16 it says he. This shows us very clearly that this tree is symbolic of a man, and we're going to see before this chapter is over that it is symbolic of King Nebuchadnezzar. Then also this phrase, the decree of the watchers, is also translated the decree of the Most High in verse 24. Now, last of all, notice the great desire in verse 17. This matter is by the decree of the watchers. And as I said, this decree of the watchers is interpreted as the decree of the Most High in verse 24. So it is a decree of God. And the demand by the word of the Holy One to the intent, notice this, here's the purpose, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdoms of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men. This verse expresses the key thought of this chapter. No, let me back up. It expresses the key thought of this entire book. It's going to be mentioned in verse 17. It's going to be mentioned again in the end of verse 25, till thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdoms of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. And so God very clearly wants him to know this, and he's mentioned as the Most High many times in this. And he gives it to whomsoever he will, and that demonstrates for us the truth of Romans chapter 13. And in verse 1, where it says this, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. Notice this, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. God will give a nation the kind of leadership that it deserves. Now, notice one more thing in verse 16. Let his heart be changed from another man, and let a beast's heart be given unto him. Notice this, and let 7 times pass over him. The word times in this verse is very important. It's key to understanding what a time is when it's used other places in this chapter. Now we know when we look at this that 7 times here is talking about 7 years. We're going to find that phrase again. Let me just read you the verses and we'll be done. But in Daniel 7:25 it says, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and seasons, and they shall be given unto his hand until a time and a times, and the dividing of time. So that last phrase, a time and times, and the dividing of time, we'll deal with it when we get there, but that is speaking of 3.5 years is what's being talked about there. That's a time and times and dividing of time. And then Daniel 12:7, it says, and I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, which he held up in his right hand and his left hand upon heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever and ever, that it shall be for time and times and a half. Once again, 3.5 years. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. So both of those phrases in Daniel 7:25 and in Daniel 12:7 refers to a 3.5 year time period that we will look at deeper when we get to those verses. Have a great day.